Hi, my name is Robert Chelle with Chelle Law, and I'm an attorney that assists veterinary associates with employment contract and independent contractor agreement issues. Today, I'm going to talk about what makes a veterinary associate contract bad. So, if you are either switching jobs or perhaps coming out of school or training, what are some giant red flags that you need to be careful of if you're going to sign a new contract? First, and probably the most common, are compensation models that are unfair to the veterinary associate. So the ProSal method or some kind of collections-based agreement where you would get a percentage of whatever the practice collects based upon your services are very common in the veterinary industry. And there are some, big problems associated with that can affect the compensation of the veterinary associate. One, you never want to start a job immediately on collections. It takes time to build up a practice, especially if you're in like small animal, maybe a single vet-owned clinic, something like that. It just simply takes time to ramp up. Now, maybe if you're doing relief work or urgent care or emergency veterinary medicine, this isn't as applicable. But when you are building a practice, it takes time, and many times it'll take somewhere between 9 to 12 months for your practice to reach maturity. So if you come in immediately on collections, you are not going to make nearly as much money as you're probably expecting, and it can be an issue for the first, until that ramp up period has concluded. And then in the ProSal method or other types of collections-based models, many times there'll be language that states, they will compare whatever was paid out to you. Let's just say it's a monthly reconciliation. They'll compare what was paid out to you versus what was collected based upon your services. If there is a deficit, meaning if they paid you more than you actually made for the practice, they sometimes can carry forward a negative balance. So let's say you were paid $3,000 more than you made for the practice. A negative $3,000 balance would move on to the next month, and then ultimately you would have to make that back at some point. I just think it's a bad idea to start a job immediately getting into a negative hole. So what you need to do is have some kind of guarantee period where you're either given just a base salary that then transitions into a collections-based model, or a daily rate or something like that, where you are guaranteed an amount of money as you build up the practice. And then once you're, at a good level, then you could transition into the percentage of collections model. And last thought on compensation, kind of some, concerns would be if you're paid on collections, not as important in the veterinary industry, but I just want to throw this out there. If you're in a heavy insurance practice, veterinary insurance is becoming more popular. In some areas of the country, it's very popular. In others, it's not utilized at all. But if you're in a heavy veterinary insurance practice, there will be a period of time where you'll do a service, but the practice won't receive any of the money. It could be, up to 30 days, sometimes more. And so if you are on a contract that's paid on collections and you decide to leave the practice, you give notice and you're ready to move on. Well, if it takes 30 days for the practice to receive any money based upon your services, if it's veterinary pet insurance, and then you work out the last month, many contracts will state you will get no compensation after your date of termination. And so what you've essentially done is worked for free for the last month. So you want to make sure there's language in your contract that states you will receive credit for any trailing collections, meaning anything paid to the practice after you leave. That way you're not leaving any money on the table. Now, once again, this is not as big of a deal in veterinary medicine versus, in a physician practice where nearly, the vast majority of them are completely insurance-based. But still, it's one thing to think about. Next would be a super broad non-compete. You want to make certain that when you leave, that you're not completely stuck out of providing veterinary care somewhere. So The scope needs to be limited to what you're doing for that practice. So I'll give an example. Let's say you're working in a small animal, veterinary owned practice. You don't want the non-compete to say you can't practice veterinary medicine. You want it to say you can't practice in a small animal clinic, versus, could allow you to do urgent care, could allow you to do, work in a hospital doing emergency care as well. You just want some options, or perhaps you could do relief work. Sometimes we'll work in language that says it only applies to places where you're working, more than 3 shifts a month or something like that. You just don't want to be completely stuck not being able to practice for 1 year and 10 miles from your primary practice location. So limit the scope to what you're doing specifically for that employer. Next would be termination provisions. There will be some kind of language that states you have to provide a certain amount of notice, most of the time 60 to 90 days. You want to make certain that the notice is the same for both parties. Absolutely unfair if the practice has to give you 30 days notice, but you have to give them 180 days notice. I even reviewed a contract yesterday for a veterinarian where the practice had 0 notice requirement. The vet could come in and they could say, you know what, this is your last day, thank you. Whereas they had to give 120 days notice. So that it should be, the same for both parties. It's just not fair. I mean, I could go on. There's probably a giant list of things that can make a veterinary contract bad, but those are some of the highlights. If you have any questions about your employment contract or independent contractor agreement, feel free to contact my law firm at the information listed below in the description. And I appreciate you watching the video. All right, thanks. Take care.